Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm broadcasting live from somewhere in British Columbia. I think it's near Surrey, but don't quote me on that. So I'm here at the Sri Lankan monastery, what's it called? BVS dot something? British Columbia Vihara Society or something? BVS.org, BVS.ca. I'm in the basement. I was trying to set this up. I'm staying actually in a separate building, but no internet. So I had this all set up right outside my kuti, and that didn't work. Too much wind for the mic. So I've snuck down in the basement of the main building. And I don't think they need to use this space. It's 6 p.m. here, and in an hour I'm set to give a talk in yet another building. So in the meantime, we're here to study a quote from Buddha Vachana. But it looks like we're actually dealing with two separate texts, because the quote on our meditation page is completely different from the quote that I have in my PDF. So I've been looking at that quote, PDF quote, for August 14th, and somehow it's gotten out of sync. We'll have to see what tomorrow's quote is. It'll just be a surprise. So this is a lesson in impermanence. Instead, we have a quote about a wonderful story about Anuruddha. Anuruddha, this is a story of how Anuruddha was living in a park together with two of his fellow monks. The Buddha was dwelling in Gositarama. Is this even the right sutta? Anandya and Himala were dwelling in Pachina Wangsadaya, a park in the Chaitya kingdom. It's during the time when the Kosambi monks were fighting. Kosambi monks had this big quarrel going on, and it was probably the most high-profile schism, besides the one suppose caused by Devadatta, which was also fairly high-profile. But this was a big deal. This whole monastery was divided into two. The monks divided into two, and their lay followers divided into two. All the nuns, the female monks, divided into two. The angels who guarded the monastery divided into two. Like two factions, all the way up to, I think, the heaven of the 33. And so the Buddha left, and on his way to where he was going, he went on his way to Parilayakawana, which was where the Buddha was headed. He stops off at Pachinawangsa Nigadaya. Pachinawangsadaya. Pachina is, I think, something to do with the fact that it was east of where he lived, where the Buddha lived. Anyway, I don't know. That's what the book says. So they were dwelling here, these three monks, Anuruddha and Nandya and Himala. And they wouldn't talk. They stayed completely silent. And every 5 days, I believe it was, every 5 days they would get together. This is how he described it. The Buddha asked about this quote. The Buddha asked how they managed to abide this way, and Anuruddha said, "Whichever of us returns first from the village with alms food, prepares the seat, sets out water for drinking and washing, and puts the refuse bucket in its place. Whichever of us returns last eats any food left over if he wishes, otherwise he throws it away where there is no greenery, or drops it into water where there is no life. He puts away the seats and the water for drinking and washing. He puts away the refuse bucket after washing it, and he sweeps out the refectory." Goes on, and they do this and they do all that, all sorts of things. And if anything is too heavy, they call someone else by a signal with the hand, and they move it by joining hands. But because of this, we do not break out into speech. But every 5 days, we sit together all night discussing the Dhamma. This is how we abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. So completely silent, except for every 5 days. I'm not sure why 5 days, but that was how it was. Every 5 days, they would get together and recite the Dhamma all night, stay up all night, reciting the Buddha's teaching. And furthermore, they have the vow, or this state of mind, or this inclination of mind, that they will think, speak, and act with love towards each other, both in public and private, and put aside their own wishes. This is important in the community, something that monks should remember. That we all have opinions and ideas of how things should be done. And often good people can have different ideas about how things should be done. We're not always right. And even when we are right, it's not always right that we should push our way on other people. Just because we have a better way of doing something, doesn't mean that pushing other people to do it that way will have a positive result. Right? Anyway. It's an interesting sutta for how it describes how monks live together in silence and coming together every 5 days. To me, that part was more interesting. But interesting is the putting away of your own wishes. Anuruddha also says that describes it as without living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. And then he describes how they put aside their own wishes. And another interesting thing you might find interesting about this sutta is when Anuruddha says this, the other two monks say, yes, indeed, that's how we live. And then he describes the daily practice and so on, and everyone else says, yes, that's how we. And then the Buddha asks whether they've attained any distinctions, any special realizations, and Anuruddha says they have. He says something about having visions. Oh, that's right. There's 2 versions of this. It looks like. In the other version, they have the jhanas and they enter the jhanas or something. But I thought, so this is right. This is, yeah, no, this one is different. This isn't the one I'm thinking of. In this sutta, there's 2 versions of this. This sutta is the Upakilesa Sutta. Anyway, the quote itself is mainly about communal harmony. And so it's not a very deep quote, I suppose. But it speaks of an interesting situation where these 3 monks stayed. Actually, they were living there, and they were under the protection of this, under the hospitality of the park keeper, who was sort of keeping people away from them. So when the Buddha shows up, he forbids him to enter. He doesn't know who the Buddha is, and so he says, hey, don't go in there. These monks are living in harmony in there. Don't disturb them, please. And Anuruddha has to come out and say, no, it's okay. This guy's one of us. He's our teacher. After the Buddha leaves, then the monks, in the other version of the sutta, after the Buddha leaves, the other monks ask him, "Hey, Anuruddha, how is it that you knew about our? How did you know that we had the same realizations and so on?" But Anuruddha had special magical powers. I can't remember how it ends. Anyway, I was all set to talk about the other quote. It's a little deeper, a little more interesting. But okay, so we have more time for questions. Go ahead. Do you want to ask me?
Ready for questions, Bhante? Is meditation affected by taking antidepressants?
Yeah, definitely. I've talked about this before, and my bet, and I don't have anything to back this up besides anecdotal experience, is that it stops you from attaining realization. Antidepressants will stop you. They'll be very much in your way. I guess I can't say it's impossible. There's no reason to think that it's impossible for someone on antidepressants to become enlightened, but I would say it's highly, highly unlikely, and orders of magnitude more difficult than someone actually dealing with their depression. So a person dealing with their depression can easily become free from suffering. It's easier for them than someone who's all happy, happy, joy, joy. In most cases, someone who's depressed. I mean, there's this monk who said, the Buddha was pretty bummed out when he left home as well, or the Bodhisattva. So, depression isn't necessarily a negative thing. It can sometimes be a sign of wisdom that is immature and is just needs some guidance. So you see the problem, but you can't find the solution. Someone who is depressed often realizes things that people who are undepressed don't, or not depressed don't. It's not always like that, but people who are depressed are looking for an answer, looking for a way out. That's why they can fall victim to religious people. They can become highly religious and can be taken advantage of and that sort of thing. For that reason, because they're looking for a way, looking for a solution. Antidepressants, on the other hand, it's fake. It prevents you from, it's an artificial protection. It prevents you from seeing the truth of life. And it only lasts, it covers up the symptoms for a while. And I've never taken them, of course, I've never taken antidepressants, but from what I've seen and from what people have told me, it doesn't actually fix the problem. It just provides you with something that obscures it, and that's sort of the feeling you get. So if you could just take an eraser and erase the depression part, if that's what it was doing, then you might argue that that's actually, I still wouldn't argue it, but you could argue that somehow that's beneficial to put you in a better frame of mind to meditate in cases. But that's, in either case, that's not what it does. It doesn't fix the depression, it just obscures it. Yeah, I wouldn't take antidepressants. And I know, I've said that, and I think I would agree that, like, if you're working in the world and you need to perform, then power to you. If you need to take antidepressants for a meditation course, it shouldn't even be a concern, because you want to experience the truth. You want to see things as they are. You don't want to try and fix things. Now, the First Noble Truth is not just the truth of suffering, it's that suffering should be pariññaya, it should be fully understood. Right? Suffering should be fully understood, fully known. Literally known, not even understood, just fully known. So there's no, there's no, it's not unequivocable. It's no uncertain terms. It should see suffering. There should be no running away from suffering. That's the First Noble Truth, and that's really the one that we practice. So anyone who tells you that meditation should be comfortable, should be pleasant, doesn't understand the First Noble Truth. Pariññaya should be fully known. How could you fully know suffering if it's always pleasant? You could, but not if you're seeking out pleasant, not if you're avoiding what is unpleasant. Things can be pleasant, and you can still understand that even those pleasant things are not happiness. That can happen, but you have to be fully open to the spectrum, full spectrum of reality. As long as you're avoiding suffering and seeking out pleasure, you can't understand the First Noble Truth. Hey, is Leela here from Thailand? Who do we have here? If that's Leela from Thailand, that's a pretty cool thing. I didn't know we'd have anyone from Thailand.
That is Leela from Thailand.
Is it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone else, I'm not excluding people. It's just I was expecting a bunch of Westerners and not a Thai person. But Leela's an English teacher in Thailand, I think. And she has a wonderful daughter. And she's always been a good friend.
We're a very international group. We've got Simon in Denmark.
I don't have anybody in Sri Lanka.
Mark.
Surprising. Any Sri Lankans?
Well, it would be, let's see, it would be about 9:20 a.m. in Sri Lanka, right? Yeah, that's a reasonable time. Where's everyone from Sri Lanka?
No, I think it would be earlier than that. It would be 9 in... Oh, no, maybe you're right.
12 hours?
Is it? I thought it was 12 to Thailand.
You might be right. 10 and a half to India. So
Yeah.
10 and a half to Sri Lanka as well?
Still, it's not that early. All right, questions?
What type of meditation would you recommend to deal with depression?
Follow-up question. Well, insight meditation, satipatthana. Satipatthana vipassana. Vipassana based on the four satipatthana. Insight meditation based on the four foundations of mindfulness. Absolutely. Depression is suffering. It's mental suffering, domanassa. This is, the Buddha said there are 5 benefits of, or 5 goals that the path of satipatthana leads to. And one of them is dukkha domanassa nang atangamaya, to overcome or to go through, to overcome really, physical and mental suffering. Atangamaya. Ah, we've got a Scots person. Oh, our meditator list has flags on it, right?
It does.
We've got somebody there with a red and white cross, Denmark.
Simon from Denmark. Marcel
US.
Marcel and Mason from Canada.
Sweden, Rose from Sweden.
Yeah, lots of Americans. I find it hard to meditate when I'm too happy. When if I get kind of exhilarated, that's really hard to meditate when you're too happy. I almost don't mind feeling a little depressed when it's time to meditate. It's a little easier to settle down and meditate.
Definitely can be the case. Because when you're depressed, you're looking for an answer. You're looking for a solution. When things are good, you're not looking for anything.
Yeah,
except to keep your happiness.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a restless feeling when you get exhilarated. Very hard for me to settle down and meditate. We have a question. Can insight meditation be complemented with reflection of repulsiveness, or should the 32 parts of the body be practiced by itself?
No, definitely it can be incorporated. It's in one of the 4 protective meditations. It'll protect your mind and keep your mind in a good way to be able to practice the 4 satipatthana. Keep you from getting too caught up in lust. Can make it difficult, if not impossible, to practice the satipatthana. So, yeah, useful. We're going to go through this in the Visuddhimagga. This is one of the best sections in the concentration part of the Visuddhimagga. I think this Sunday I won't be able to do the classes though, because we're having an all-day meditation course Saturday and Sunday, so I'm gonna have to skip this week.
Oh, that's right, because it would be about mid-morning where you are.
Oh right, wait, we've got a 3-hour difference. What time would it be?
So it's
10 here.
It'll be 10 a.m.
10 a.m. actually might work. 10 a.m. would work. 10 a.m. and then 11 for Pali. Yeah, I can do that. And 11 would be lunch here, but I'll tell them I'll eat at 12. See, because we can eat till 1. Technically, we're only supposed to eat in the morning, but morning here is until 1 because daylight savings time. So midday, true midday is like 1:30 or something.
So if people listening don't know what the Visuddhimagga group is, we have a study group on Sunday, and we've been meeting since February now. And we started out studying the Visuddhimagga. We take turns reading out loud, and Bhante gives commentary and answers our questions as we go through. And we've gotten pretty far. I think we're in chapter 7 now. And then somewhere along the way we added in Pali. So we're learning the ins and outs of Pali, which is tough, but very interesting.
Every Sunday, 1 p.m. Visuddhimagga, 2 p.m. Pali via Mumble. So you have to use Mumble and connect Mumble to sirimangalo.org.
Yes,
Username, password doesn't matter, whatever you want. Don't change any of the other settings.
Yep, that's 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Eastern, so 1700 UTC time if you're somewhere other than Eastern United States or Eastern Canada. But it's a good group. And the other group, I know someone had asked about this the other day, and I forgot to mention anything about it. The other group is we're looking to get together a group of volunteers, people who are interested in supporting the monastery that Bhante will be establishing come January. So
how's that going? How's the project going?
The campaign?
How's the campaign going?
The campaign is going well. I checked on it earlier, and more than a third of the way to the goal after just 5 or 6 days. So that seems like a really good start. And then the group is, again, it's a group of people who are interested in supporting Bhante's establishment of this monastery. So looking for people that are, willing to just do various things. Whatever is needed, we'll meet weekly with Bhante on either Google Plus or Google Hangouts or Mumble, depending on the size of the group. Check with him and see what the monastery needs in any given week. And some weeks it might need actual items. Other weeks, maybe more some sort of a task or a project that we can help with, even things that can be done from far away. So that will be starting not this Sunday night, but a week from this Sunday night on August 23rd. And
why not this Sunday night?
Well, I'm going to actually be traveling.
You're
Yeah, after class, I'm heading up to Maine to go camping for a few days, and I mean, you're welcome to, you know, do it without me, but you're probably traveling too, or doing something. Or are you not coming back until Monday?
No, I'll be free at that time.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
What
so
was
if
the
you want
time?
to,
What were you saying?
yeah,
9:30?
we were saying after the Dhamma talk on Sunday
Right.
night, so maybe 9:30.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're
Yeah.
interested,
But
yeah,
no, we'll wait for you.
either or, but
No hurry.
if you're interested, just be there on Sunday nights. There's also we put together a quick Facebook group just to give information too. It's if you're not on Facebook, don't want to be on Facebook, there's no need to join that. But if you are and you would like to, it's just look up Suri Mangalo Volunteers. It's a group, and just click join on that, and then you'll get information on when the meetings are, and or if you miss the meetings, maybe what was discussed at the meeting, what the needs of the monastery are for that week. Just trying to provide a little support there.
No other questions?
No, there's just a question on where and when is the Visuddhimagga talk, but I think we pretty much covered that. It is online. It's on Mumble, an audio chat program. If you haven't used that yet, it's one of these things where you download a client and you can speak, kind of like a big conference call. But we have all the information for the study group also on a Facebook group. So if you want to peek in and get all the specifics on that, if you go to Facebook and look up study group with Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu, I believe. Check.
Yeah, the thing, Mumble's kind of, if you think of it, it's like Skype, except with Skype you have to invite people to the conversation. With Mumble, you have a server and just log in or just connect, So you don't need an invitation. You just have to know the server, and then you log in or log out whenever you want. No invitation necessary. So it's useful for classes. And the audio is pretty good. Low latency is the key. There's no lag, so everyone's able to talk with each other without having to wait.
So I just put the study group and the volunteer group links into the chat in the meditation app if anybody is interested in those.
The stages of knowledge will come in the third section. We are now partway through the second section. So, as long as I don't die beforehand, I'll probably be holding courses that will lead us through the third section. If I die first, no promises.
What do you think we'll do with the Pali now that we're through with the textbook there?
Well, we probably should just start on the parts that are missing, right? Compounds and derivation. Derivation isn't so important. It's quite useful, but it's a little more advanced. And it's not nearly as important for a beginner as memorizing the paradigms, which I'm assuming most of the people haven't done. But compounds would be useful to go through because there's different kinds of compounds. And because compounds are so much more common in Pali than they are in English, you should learn about the different types. It's not difficult. It's a little confusing because they don't actually, different texts say different things and the categories aren't perfect. But anyway, it'll be good to give you some examples of different kinds of compounds so you get an idea.
Sounds good.
I was talking to the monk here. We had a couple of interesting discussions. I asked them why they use Sanskrit. Why do Sri Lankan monks use Sanskrit? Because he's actually just finished his PhD, or he's submitted his dissertation, or whatever you call it, on Buddhist Sanskrit. And then I heard him using Sanskrit today in the chants, and I said, why is it that Sri Lankan monks use chants? Because it's Sinhala. He speaks in Sinhala, but most of the words are Sanskrit. They're like, why do they use skanda instead of kanda, and sanskara instead of sankhara? When Sri Lanka was really the birthplace of, not the birthplace actually, that was wrong of me to say, but it's where the Pali Tipitaka came from. I don't even know if that you could say that. Anyway, it's where it was first written down, right? Or is it? It's where the commentaries came from. Anyway, it was a stronghold of Pali Buddhism. It still is, even today. Even today, Pali Buddhism is probably at its strongest in Sri Lanka, or Burma maybe. So why then do they use Sanskrit? He didn't really have an answer.
Oh, he didn't explain why?
He kind of agreed with me when he said that, when I said that Sanskrit just sounds more impressive. He agreed that was probably a part of it. It just sounds more impressive to say sanskara. I mean, it sounds, I would say it sounds a little ostentatious, honestly. But
So is Tripitaka Sanskrit and Tipitaka is Pali?
yeah.
Throw a few extra letters in there.
Yeah, because 3 is 3. 3. Eka is the same, Dve is the same, but Ti is 3 in Sanskrit. It's funny, and they use the Pali, but then when they translate into Sinhala, it's all Sanskrit. Doesn't make much sense. Vidarshana, they call Vipassana Vidarshana, because it's an interesting Pali thing that, or Sanskrit thing, that darsh, the root is darsh actually, which means to see, in regards to seeing, but it becomes pas. It should actually be pashyana, but they call it vidarshana, because darsh and pash, they are interchangeable. It's the same root, and it's used, it's just switched at different times. But vidarshana is Sanskrit. So, to ask the people. Anyway.
Is that very common, or is it just in this one particular vihara where you are?
No, that's Sinhalese. Sinhalese uses many Sanskrit words.
Interesting.
And I was asking him, is there any history of Brahmanism? And there isn't really, as far as he was saying, as far as I've heard. There isn't really a history of Brahmanism in Sri Lanka. Before Mahinda came, who was the monk who brought Buddhism, son of King Ashoka, before he came, it was animism. So even if they had been using Sanskrit at all, they wouldn't have these Buddhist words. Buddhist words like sanskara is, and skanda and vidarshana, these are, I think, specifically Buddhist words, and the only way you'd actually get the Sanskrit counterparts is in the Mahayana Buddhism. And I don't think there was ever really much Mahayana Buddhism in Sri Lanka. So the only other way is, as the Mahayana developed in India, and this whole culture of university-based Buddhism, that it became more, they adopted the Brahmin standard, because Sanskrit is a much more standardized language. Pali is kind of, I mean, it's much more like the Buddha, I think. The Buddha was more of a counterculture than institution, right? The Buddha was fairly a bit of a rebel, you could say. I mean, and I think that has a deep meaning to it, like in a deep sense. Because you think about the Buddha rebelled against the institution and the entirety of the institution. He rebelled against the angels, the gods, some samsara as a whole. He rebelled against the entire system, not just the Brahmins, but everything they stood for. He rebelled against it. So Pali seems like the perfect language when it's not the institutional language. It's not the perfect structured language. It's the people's language. I just saw some people arguing about the use of the words fewer or less. Someone said less, like, you know how they say 10 items or less in the express aisle in the grocery store? It should actually be 10 items or fewer. But there was someone was ranting and said, no, fewer is a word that was made up to solve a non-existent problem. Less works just fine. The rant was significantly longer than that, but it was basically. We got another question while we're.
I think so. If you note that your mind is wandering, since you are not trying to control anything, does that mean you should keep thinking and get lost in thought? Or are you supposed to try and control it?
It's not control. You're supposed to try to understand it and cultivate objectivity in regards to it, to see it clearly. It's not the same as controlling something. You're trying to purify it. Like you have this stream, this is your stream of thought, and unimpeded it's going to go in its own, it's going to go wrong, it's tainted. So you insert a filter and then it continues on, but the defilements are filtered out. Mindfulness is like a filter. It purifies the stream. You're not controlling it. So the thinking is actually allowed to continue, but the desire to think, the curiosity, the interest, the concern, whatever it is that's the emotions involved with it aren't allowed to continue. And as a result, the thinking doesn't really last. I mean, it doesn't work so well with thinking because mindfulness in itself is a thought, so there is a disruption there. But the intention isn't to stop thinking. The intention is to see the thought, that's just a thought, to purify it, so you're no longer emotional about it. But it'd be clearer if you think about the stomach rising and falling. No, you're not trying to control the stomach, you're just trying to purify your observation of it so that you're no longer trying to control it. You're actually trying to free yourself from the need to control. Need to control experiences, because you'll find yourself automatically controlling the stomach. That's why it's such a good object of reflection, because you'll see impermanent suffering in non-self. You'll see yourself trying to control it. You'll see yourself wishing or becoming upset that it's not stable, that it's not constant, and as a result you'll come to let go. It leads you, it forces you to let go. Yeah, I think that's a good argument for saying Dhamma instead of Dharma, Kamma instead of Karma, because the Buddha was a rebel, a counterculture. He used the language of the people, not the language of the institution. And we should too. I mean, I just rather use it because it was fairly clearly how the Buddha taught. The words that the Buddha used were not Sanskrit. I suppose Mahayana Buddhists might challenge that, but I doubt it, honestly. No, and many of them are now studying the Pali. I just had a Taiwanese nun in Canada. She's using my digital Pali, the digital Pali reader, to teach in Taiwan, and so she asked for the new version of it. So yeah, just using Pali because it's the words that the Buddha used. So to use words like nirvana and samskara and dharma just doesn't feel right. Also, it's too institutional, right? It's the Brahmin. The Brahmins were the only ones who used Sanskrit. From what I understand, Sanskrit wasn't even a real language. It was artificially created because to give rules to language that was chaotic. Language is always evolving, and so they wanted to stop that and get back to a language that was perfect. And so Sanskrit, that's the great thing about Sanskrit, is how elegant it is. It is fairly, it's about as close, I think, to perfect as any language has gotten. And that's because it was designed to be perfect. In the sense, perfect, it's not perfect, but perfect in the sense of having rules and following rules and exemplifying them. So a Sanskrit word can often be very difficult to pronounce because you're sticking things together and you're not modifying them very much. You're keeping them in their form, or you're following rules in how you change them. It's a fairly well constructed language, but it was artificially constructed, and it was the language of the elites. The only people who could learn it were the Brahmins, this sort of thing. So it's not really a language that we want to use as Buddhists. And so it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and you hear this and you think, well, why are they using this language that was made by a priestly caste and used as a means of dividing people and keeping people away from the teachings and keeping people away from God so they could act as a middleman, right? The idea was, we have the language, so you need us. And so hence the reason why it's often looked up to. It's seen as this sort of elite language and only certain people, and it's intoxicating in that way. Anyone who uses the Sanskrit words feels somehow superior as a result. That's what I hinted at with this monk, and he kind of agreed. He understood that expression. He's a fairly accommodating sort of monk. He's a nice guy. He doesn't like argument or conflict, so he's always trying to find. So I don't know whether he actually agreed with me or just wanted to placate me. We then had a big argument about immigration and whether Canada should institute strong immigration reform to keep out. I mean, for them, it's the Tamils. There are so many Tamil Sri Lankans here, and all of them claim to be refugees from Sri Lanka. Not all of them, but there's so many refugees here, and the Sri Lankans are suspicious of this because they didn't seem to think that the Tamils had it very bad, and the Tamils were saying that they had it horrible. And anyway, many of them were terrorists, and so anyway, there's a big argument, and which side is right? I mean, I don't want to make it sound like both sides are equally valid, because that's usually never the case. But in this case, I'm not sure which side is correct. But anyway, that wasn't the point. That wasn't my point. But that's where they were coming from. My point was, if you close off, my point was kindness is important and compassion is important. And the argument is that if you're compassionate, people take advantage of it. And my question was, is that really such a bad thing? The conventional wisdom is yes, that destroys your country if you're too compassionate. And I suppose I could agree with too compassionate. But if you're just because your compassion leads people to take advantage of you, I don't think that necessarily means that you're being too compassionate. That a result of your compassion may be people temporarily taking advantage of you. Because we can never lose sight of the idea of karma. That really, if people do actually take advantage of you and you lose as a result of it, then you should somehow attribute it to karma, to having to do with, could be present karma that these people are making fresh, but you shouldn't be concerned with it. Most likely it's bad deeds that you've done, because compassion is something that empowers you, it brings you friends and respect and social status. Over the long term, it has great benefit. And I think that's what you see in countries that have been compassionate. Some good things about Canada is the peacekeeping activities and being fairly compassionate. Part of it is we have so much space, so we can take people in, but they say, well, that's a problem now because you have these groups of people who have become very powerful, there's so many of them that they have a voice. Then they come here and they're able to change discourse. They're able to have power in society. Anyway, it's a very complicated situation, and I just wanted to talk about the compassion side. It's interesting to me. I think I hadn't thought about it, but hearing that Canada has been compassionate made me think, or it sounds like that's a compassionate. And they were saying, yeah, it wasn't really compassion. There was a political motivation and so on, which could very likely be true.
There is one more question. What words were introduced to Pali by Buddha?
Introduced to Pali. Well, Pali, first of all, isn't a language. Pali actually was used to describe the texts. The language was Magadhan. That's Magadha is the language that we understood that the Buddha spoke. It was the language of the people of Magadha, or that area, what is now Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, I think. And I don't know that the Buddha introduced any of the words. I suppose there are some construct that he used. Yeah, I would bet that he introduced some constructs, but I think it'd be hard. I mean, I'm certainly not in a position to tell you which ones those are. You know, there's words like sabhava, sabhava. I don't know that he actually used it, but it's used. I don't know that he actually introduced any words. He used a lot of words differently. Obviously, he used dharma and karma differently. Buddha, he used differently. Even just the word Buddha wasn't used, I don't think, not in that sense. Maybe nibbana, that may have been a word that he coined. I don't know that it was ever used. I mean, nirvana might have been used in a more secular way, you know, like when you unbind something. But it may not have been used. No, it probably was. It was probably just the first time it had been used to describe a religious goal.
Did you say Buddha was a word before the Buddha was enlightened?
The thing about Pali Sanskrit is there are near infinite words. They don't have words like we have words. They form words, which you may have been realizing through our study of Pali. And so it may be that no one ever used a certain formation, but that formation still exists and is still proper. If someone does decide to use the formation, then they can use it. You know, even the paradigms, not every version of every word is used. Not every declension of every word is used in the Pali Tipitaka. But I mean, that doesn't mean it wasn't ever used in conversation or in teaching. But derivation it goes even further. A word, like you have roots and you turn them into nouns. So, and you add prefixes and suffixes and compounds and so on. So the amount of words is possible is staggering. So someone was asking for a spell check. We had this many years ago. Someone, when I used to do internet forums, someone asked for Pali spell check. And I was trying to explain how difficult that would be. Because you can't just have a list of words. And they were arguing, someone was saying, well, what about words that are in the Tipitaka? I said, well, fine, but the Tipitaka is only a certain fraction of the formation. So yes, if you want a spell check for words that do conform to the Tipitaka and commentaries, it's a good start. And you'd hit the most common words. But you couldn't use it as a spell check, really. A Pali Sanskrit spell check would be very, very difficult. Because you need to think about compounds. You need to parse the compound. I mean, digital Pali reader comes close. If it's in the digital Pali reader, if you click on it and it comes up with something, then at least you know that that compound is potentially possible, or that word is potentially possible. But the digital Pali reader is far from a spell checker. If you want to know about the digital Pali reader, I think you can just Google it at this point. It's a Firefox extension, so you need Firefox. And then check it out. Okay, I have to go. 9 minutes, I'm giving another talk, so I'm late. But thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. I'll try to be here tomorrow. Yeah, should be able to be. I'll just leave all this stuff down here, maybe. Okay, so thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thanks, Robin.
We'll see you tomorrow.